Welcome everybody as we get settled here. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Talk about all the things that, any questions that you may have, and sharing some really great stories as well. We're going to have a discussion with our panel with a few questions. I'm just going to state the questions, and then kind of if you feel moved to answer it, just go ahead and unmute yourself as a panelist. And some of these questions don't apply to all the panelists, but they're good for kind of general thought for everybody. So the first question is, sometimes we tend to think, maybe as parents of a trans child or a person going through transition or realizing that they may be on a journey towards transition, that it's just going to be negative all the time. It's going to be hard and sad. And we know that's not true. So if you'd like to share some of the positive aspects of being trans or being in transition for the group, that'd be really interesting to hear about that, some positive aspects.
Yeah, so I have a few things to talk about with regards to this question. The first being that when talking about trans people and trans issues, quote unquote, we often focus on the negative experiences, which makes total sense because we are trying to advocate for our needs to be better represented and better fulfilled in society. So it totally makes sense, but it also carries the side effect of potentially giving people a distorted view of what being trans might actually be like for some people. I know that even within the trans community, people talk about dysphoria a lot, which is an experience. It's a feeling of distress or unease, usually talked about with regards to your feeling like your body doesn't match, isn't how it should be. Dysphoria can also come up when you're misgendered, when someone is calling you the wrong pronoun, or the wrong name, or wrong gendered terms like sister instead of brother, something like that. And that's super important to talk about, of course. But I think that something that is definitely helpful for trans people to hear about, and also helpful for people who love trans people, that dysphoria is not all that there is. People also experience gender euphoria in contrast to gender dysphoria, and that's sort of the experience of feeling like incongruence with yourself, feeling like your body and your internal sense of identity, the way that you're being treated, all kind of align and is the way that you want it to be. It's different for everyone, and it can be like moments of euphoria, but it's really this kind of sense of alignment in my personal experience, and it's really incredible getting to feel that. I think that a lot of trans kids in particular have a great deal of self-awareness, because we kind of have to. So it can be hard to kind of be like thinking about yourself all the time and that kind of thing, like how are people perceiving me, how am I being treated? But when you get those moments of like, yes, this is it, this is correct, it's really amazing and beautiful. Also, in being trans myself, I've gotten to connect with the community at large, both the trans community specifically and the kind of greater LGBTQ plus community. And I would not be the same person without that. My life would look completely different. It's really shaped my experiences in such an overwhelmingly positive way. Having to deal with the harder things has sucked, but I am who I am because of those experiences, and I also am who I am because of the good that's come from some of those experiences, or that's kind of resulted alongside those negative experiences. I think that when you are trans, you kind of have automatic access to this kind of community, whether that be community in person or on the internet is where I really found kind of my people at first. It's really special getting to connect with people who share this kind of deep understanding. Really like seeing yourself reflected back at you is something that I think everyone ought to experience at some point in their life. And I think that being trans kind of allows for that, for those moments to happen.
Thank you, Alex. I want to echo what Alex said around around gender euphoria. There is really nothing like walking out of the house with your favorite shirt on or your favorite pants on or your favorite suit on and just going, yes, this is who I am. This finally is who I know myself to be. And the whole world gets to see me sometimes for the first time. And it's just such a feeling inside of elation. And, you know, another part that I really enjoyed about transitioning is really finding my spiritual self. You know, there's a whole lot of us that have prayed to God or creator or whoever, just take this affliction is the word that I used, out of me. And one day I kind of woke up and went, huh, the universe gave me a trans body. Okay, let's do this. And I just kind of got more spiritual with what could my creator possibly want from me in this body. And then it gave me purpose and power to actually stand up for trans youth suicide prevention. You know, nobody should feel so unloved at such a young age that they think suicide is the only option. And so I also enjoy, you know, there's so many of us that have this bright light that we shine in the world when we finally know who we are. And sometimes those of us who shine really bright in the world are meant to do shadow work. And so when we can go and hold those of us who don't realize yet how big our light is and help for it, just kind of let me just wash off that dirt for just a second. Let me help you start washing off that dirt. And when somebody finally just cracks and they can see themselves for who they know themselves to be in the face of sometimes so many people saying, you can't be that, or that's not who you are, just to really watch a young trans person blossom is another part of euphoria for me in being trans. And I like to say that, you know, you hear patience is a virtue. And I think for me, awareness is a virtue because I am super aware of so many other people and places and ways to be and have so much more compassion in places where I used to fight against. And so for me, that's really what I love about being who I am. It's just brought this depth of compassion for me and for others.
Yeah, I totally echo everything that's been said. I'll just add a little to it. I won't repeat it all. Two quick things. One, I learned my whole young life, first 28 years of my life, how to be invisible, how to stay off of people's radars, how to hide, for a whole bunch of reasons, but mostly because I you know, didn't like myself. All of a sudden, I wasn't worthy of attention and love and whatnot. And I see this in a lot of our community that is kind of still struggling with acceptance and self-love. Uh, but one of the best things about this the whole experience is that I now love myself in a way that I was never able to before. That I didn't even really think was, oh, so this is what it feels like. And so that's pretty nice. And that's I'm proud to stand out. Now I know that's not everyone's experience, but that's very much for me. Whether I'm doing my sports stuff or giving speeches and talks like this, I feel like that Jordan said it so nicely. That light that is out there. I like shining that light now in a way that I didn't even know I had before. And one other thing I'll share real quickly along this line is that in this I haven't heard this experience from that many people, but a few. So I know it's not totally isolated to me. But when I decided to transition and I had done all this therapy work for years trying to, you know, integrate who I was. And so I went on hormones. I started doing that. And then I tell this story sometimes. Janice heard the story before. When I it was about just over 3 months into my hormone journey, so to speak. And I still remember very clearly, it was like February 17th of whatever year it was. I woke up and it was like the Wizard of Oz. If you've ever seen the Wizard of Oz and it's black and white and and then all of a sudden when Dorothy gets to Oz, everything's Technicolor, right? And bright and colorful. And that was literally what my life was like. It was almost an overnight switch. I just woke up one day and was, whoa, I felt like I went from this black and white television 12-inch thing to this giant high def, 50-inch screen, living my life with full cable package and everything. Food tastes different. I have different access to different emotions that I didn't even really know I had. And I feel like I actually have control over myself in a way that I didn't feel like I had before. So just to kind of put that out there is that, yeah, there are challenges in being trans in the community and in other places and different things, but those challenges for me, are often minimized by the fact that, okay, I'll find another way around. I'm just happy being me. I'd rather have to deal with these challenges than not have these challenges and be miserable, if that makes sense. So anyway, those are the pieces I wanted to add.
I love that idea of like the curtains parting and suddenly like there's a, amazing sunset and everybody that you've ever wished to meet was suddenly there and you're yourself and you're feeling like yourself being with those people. So that's a really magical idea. Thanks for sharing that so much. Now that we've kind of grounded ourselves in some of the maybe unconsidered positives, does anybody want to share maybe one particularly difficult or challenging issue around transition? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, I'll jump right back in. So for me, the biggest part of the challenge for me was once I started transition. Transition isn't something you just do and then the next day you're done. Transition is a period of time, and it's an adjustment phase. And I don't mean just living socially in the world, but accepting ourselves, everything that comes along with it. And so for me, one of the bigger challenges was self-isolation. I worked with the youth group that Spahr, actually before Alex kind of came along hardcore, and I did that for years, and then working with clients, that was pretty much my exposure. Everything else was me kind of staying in my house, just doing the bare minimum, not traveling much, not doing much, because I didn't really know how to be me in the world. And so the most challenging thing around that for me was finding the patience to allow that process to happen, not to rush it, not to force it, not to get down on myself. And then to take those steps when I felt like I was ready. I call it the summer of yes, where I was like, nope, instead of saying no and declining offers to go out with people or to hang out or whatever, I'm going to say yes, even if I feel slightly uncomfortable, as long as it's safe. And that summer changed my life. So anyway, but that for me, that was probably one of the biggest challenges, was that isolation. Not so much not having access to the community, but just for me, self-isolation, trying to figure out who I was. That was probably the biggest challenge.
I think the biggest challenge that I've kind of experienced along the way has been usually structural barriers or kind of barriers of people not understanding and not being kind of willing to take a step forward and say like, I will actively like help you out with this. When I mean, I always knew that that I wanted to have certain gender affirming medical things like hormone therapy. I wanted puberty blockers because I realized that I was trans at a younger age. I had already kind of gone through most of puberty, unfortunately, but puberty blockers, even after you've kind of gone through puberty, they stop periods still, because it just kind of stops your brain from like taking in estrogen essentially. So it stops periods from happening if you have that anatomy. and I knew that I wanted top surgery. That was the biggest thing for me, is that I needed to have top surgery because I could not live without it. I could not live in my body the way that it was. Before I got top, and top surgery for me, because I am transmasculine, that meant a bilateral mastectomy. So before I got top surgery, I was going out in middle school every day wearing a heavy compressing sports bra, a binder on top of that, which is essentially a super compressing sports bra, kind of, but that is designed to kind of flatten and give a masculine appearance. And then another super compressing sports bra over that as well, which is very dangerous and has left me with bad lungs since. I got lucky, frankly, and have not had super bad long-lasting health issues because of it, but it's dangerous to do that, because you're squishing your lungs and you're squishing your rib cage, and it's just not good for your body. But I had to do it in order to be physically able to go out and be in the world and have people looking at me. So, having breasts was the hardest part that I've had to deal with. But trying to get access to affirming healthcare was really difficult for me. And I'm privileged enough to come from a relatively wealthy family and being white, and I'm like, I'm accustomed to being able to go into a doctor's office and get care when I need it. A lot of people do not have that experience. But even me, being in the privileged position that I have been for my whole life, I had to wait several years in order to get the most basic care, which was, for me, puberty blockers. Insurance wouldn't give wouldn't cover any sort of healthcare trans related until the person turned 18, and I was 12 or 13, 12, 13, and 14 at the time. So if I had to wait that long, I would be a part of that statistic that Jordan was mentioning. Thankfully, we were able to switch insurances, but that period of time where I had to wait was just horrific. I was talking to Jordan about this just the other day, but like I wouldn't I would come home from school. I wouldn't be able to like do PE or like play outside or hang out with friends or anything like that, because I was, first of all, just so completely self-conscious and just upset, like existing kind of passively in the body that I had. But it was also a matter of physical safety, not being able to kind of exercise. But I would come home and I would take all of that off, like all the binders and stuff. I would take all of that off. And then my mom would ask, like, hey, Alex, do you want to go out for dinner? And I would not. I would just hide in my room, essentially, because in order to go out, I knew that I would have to put it all back on again. So it's not a matter of like kids shouldn't be allowed to like bind because it's dangerous. It's a matter of kids should be given access to the healthcare that they need. Because, I knew with the utmost certainty that I needed this healthcare. And some people change their minds along the way, but that doesn't, just because a few people have changed their minds doesn't mean that people shouldn't be given access to it. Things like surgery, it's really funny. People say like you need to be on testosterone before you get top surgery. Top surgery is like the most reversible thing that you can get, probably, because you could just get implants right back on. So it doesn't matter. But testosterone has some things that go along with it that you can't change back with estrogen. But ultimately it was those kind of structural access issues, and then as well as schools having a hard time navigating school infrastructure, and then most of all, kind of what impacts me now is like hearing all of the stories of people who are just struggling so much, particularly with schools or families or just living under capitalism. There are so many members of our community who are just treated so terribly. And it's heartbreaking, and it pisses me off like nothing else. Yeah, that's what I'll say on that.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Really, it's amazing to hear what you've been through, and to know that you're here really among family with Jana and Jordan and Cami, and that you've found community and ways to get through. It's really special to see that. I just want to take a super quick moment to encourage the the group that's here attending, that you're welcome to put questions in the chat, any kind of comment you may have. We do have a couple more questions, but if you have something else that you'd like to make sure that we ask our panel, please do go ahead and put that in the chat at any time now. I wanted to kind of pull Jana out a little bit, and as Alex was sharing about how hard it was to go to school and binding and participating in family things, like I can only imagine like having to go to a wedding or a funeral or something. It's like, what just sounds like a nightmare, but you're a parent and you are madly in love with your child who you're seeing their suffering. And how do you work with that? What would you say to parents?
Rachel, thanks for asking that. And yes, anytime we've shared, Amaya and Alex had some very similar experiences, even identifying differently, but both leaning toward transmasculine, as Alex mentioned. And Amaya also went through many of the same iterations that Alex described, having a body that just didn't feel right, specifically the breasts. And I would say that I was very scared as a parent to go down a path that hadn't really been tread very often, because we also we were not the first families to get gender affirming care for under 18, but we were among the first wave, so to speak. And my kid's a little older, 5 years older than Alex. And he started his transition around, he started asking for binding in 2011 or 10. He was 10, he had early puberty, and he was so insistent about this. And yet, I think I wasn't sure where to go with it. There were so few resources. And then I finally met another parent who said to me, I thought maybe I should just wait till my kid's 18 and they can sign the paperwork themselves, and I don't have to sign off on this, because this is a big deal to sign off on this. And the mom said to me, I used to think that too. And then I realized, like, don't you want to be the one who helps your child through that? Like, surgically, would you want to help your child recover? And I was like, oh, yeah. And do you want to be invited into your child's experience when they're 18? Maybe they will think that you don't want to be invited in, and because you told them that. And so I really, that turned me around. And I will say that there was a clear euphoria at the moment we saw the unveiling of his new chest. And I truly describe it as a rebirthing of my child. And it was truly euphoric in a way that I did not expect myself. I get the heebie-jeebies from surgeries and scars and all that. That did not happen. And so every journey is unique. Every parenting process is unique. Every trans person is unique, but there are these similar threads and we can hear them. And that is why I love being on panel with the people who can teach me. I am so grateful to have the community and the people who have shared their stories with me, because it helped me go in the direction my child needed me to go. And it wasn't always easy. And I didn't have always the support of my friends and family who were questioning my moves. And I had to really draw into those who really did understand. And meeting successful trans people was the thing that really helped me go with Amaya, in his direction. So I just am so grateful for those teachers along the way. And Amaya did have those days, same as Alex described, where he came home, took it all off, and I would say, please get the mail. And he couldn't go get the mail. And it took me a while to really understand the depth of that dysphoria. And then the euphoria when he used to walk around with his scars showing from his top surgery, and he wanted everybody to see them. So it was really different. So yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I wanted to ask Jordan if there was anything that you'd like to share about the tough things that you may have gone through, or maybe how do you work with a family member, a grandparent, or somebody that's really, resisting the transition period, or your identity, or anything else that you'd like to share about that tough situation?
You bet. Thank you. I was older when I finally transitioned. And it came from a very painful place of the pain of staying who I was became greater than the pain of potentially losing everyone and job and everything in my life. And I stepped in really quickly. I stepped into passing privilege. I grew up to look like a straight white guy. And what I found was a whole bunch of misogyny and patriarchy that I all of a sudden was given access to. It was just handed to me. And that was one of the hardest things for me, because I'm probably the biggest feminist out there now. And so part of what was hard for me was finding my voice. I grew up in a toxic church culture who told me that I was to be seen and not heard. I was to put everybody else first, not have any needs of my own. And also this piece that I was not smart enough to go to school, that I had to take whatever the pastor, who was always a he, said as the truth. I wasn't to question the man. And, I wasn't very good at following those rules. I tend to question a lot. And so, when I am talking to a parent or a grandparent about the ways that their child might feel, I bring these topics up and just ask them, how much of your concern or your resistance is coming from maybe a place of religion telling you that you should choose God over your child, and really asking them to resonate with, is that the truth? Right? Is that really what you want to do, is to choose what you think you have to do, is to choose one over the other, which the most loving, in my opinion, the most loving godlike thing you can do is support your child, right? In the face of, because what I really think about, if somebody's thinking they have to choose God or child, what I actually hear underneath that is, I don't want to be judged by somebody else. So it's the fear of being judged by society or neighbor or school or whatever for actually standing up for your child. And so I encourage parents to really look deeply, deeply, deeply at what their resistance is, where it's coming from, and if there's a chance that any of their resistance is about not wanting to be judged by somebody else, what a beautiful mentor they can become to their child about standing up for themselves in the face of judgment, really offering to help their children find authenticity, but not just authenticity, agency. It took me, I didn't even know what the word agency meant until a couple of months ago. And then I'm like, oh, that's what that means. And there was so much that just fell away from me when I could step into knowing who I am, because, nobody can know you better than you know yourself. And so really being able to go, oh, okay, this is who I am. I no longer have to, as a 48-year-old man, I no longer have to choose attachment over authenticity. I get to be authentically me, because I'm no longer reliant on my attachment to my parent or grandparent for survival. And so when we can really talk to our kids about you get to be authentic and you're not going to lose your attachment. You get to be authentic and you're going to survive. Right. So those are some of the harder questions to have, or harder questions to answer. Thank you.
If I could just add on to that question real quick as well, I wanted to say that I hear a lot of people talk about feeling like they grieve the loss of their child when their child comes out as trans, or grandchild, or whoever in their life. And I'd like to offer a potential reframing to that, because really you aren't losing anyone. What you're losing is the idea of this person, but in reality you're actually gaining a new understanding, a new kind of in to who this person is. They're telling you that they're showing their authenticity when they come out as trans. They're saying that I feel, in some cases, like I feel safe enough with you as a person to tell you this about myself. And I think that that's really a beautiful thing, and that I think should be celebrated as much as it can be, by parents and grandparents, family members, for the beautiful thing that it is, because it's not a loss. It's kind of an enrichment, I guess.
That's a great perspective too, that it's an added way um, to learn about who your child is as a human being. They're not necessarily just this thing you made. They're a person, and it's important to notice that. I wanted to ask Cami to start, and then anyone else who wants to follow along. What would you tell parents who've just found out that their child is trans or non-binary? Because there's a spectrum there. Do you have any thoughts on that, Cami?
Yes, actually, just to kind of piggyback off of what Alex was just saying, a few years ago, I expressed this term in a slightly different way, and it seemed to resonate with a lot of people. So I'll share it with you all here. And again, it's kind of mirroring what was just said, but it's coming out, whether and in any way, can be scary, right? Because when we come out, we're announcing ourselves to the world or what have you. We're giving the power to other people and hoping that they hold us and hoping that they take care of us. Well, it's the world. I can't please everybody. Not everyone's going to have that same reaction. So the way that I encourage families, parents, individuals to think about this is think about it as inviting in. Okay. Your kid has come out and, oh my gosh, that's scary. What's this going to mean? All the things that race through our heads, and well, how are other people going to judge me as a parent for it, or judge them? And there's a whole variety of different things that we think about when this happens. But this idea of, wow, this person just invited me in. This person trusts me enough to want me to join them on their journey. Wow, that I totally agree with what Alex just said. That should be celebrated more. It's a really, it's a really powerful experience. And as parents of a child who has invited them in, it's also up to you that you kind of get to choose who you invite into your family story as well, right? So if there are many layers that are there, and it can be scary. Sure, anything new and unknown can be scary. And does it involve some work? Yeah, it's probably going to have involve some work, some learning, coming to panels like this, and listening to experiences, and educating and advocating, even when we're not always in a space or ready to advocate. When we're shopping at the grocery store and someone comes up and asks us a simple question, how's your kid? And you're like, oh, what do I say? Anything? What do I do? I don't know. But to try to just, take a deep breath. It's not the end of the world, as though you might, this grief and this, I want to acknowledge that that's real, but it's not like this collapsing of a world. There tends to be so much focus on that, when you can flip it over and just be like, wow, look at this new, unique journey we get to go on. We get to have these experiences that not many people have. And we get to experience our child potentially differently than we've always experienced them, right? There are lots of different ways you could reframe it and you could look at that, but I'll stick with that concept of inviting in, right? you get to choose and you have control over who you invite in, but to be invited into somebody else's story is actually, that's connection. That's human connection right there. It doesn't really get much more than that. Yeah, so.
Jana.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that a little bit. And talking from the parent point of view, I think all parents have an expectation of what their lives are going to look like vis-a-vis being a parent, and what their dreams are and inspirations and aspirations for their children. And anyone who is a parent, I think, will agree with me that it's not really what we dreamed up. That certainly we might have some realizations of that. My daughter told me a few years ago, Mom, I really don't think I'm going to have kids. And I know that, you're kind of banking on me being your biological line. And I just want to kind of let you in on that. And I was like, wow, my 28-year-old is telling me this. I think I should believe her. And whoa. So that was an adjustment that was, one more on the parenting journey of, wow, there's so many possibilities, and I saw one. So I think of it as like, when you squint and you can see something maybe a little differently, or like you couldn't see it clearly, and then you squint and all of a sudden it actually comes into view. Some of that is about this journey I've been on with all my children, but especially my transgender child, of like, oh, if I just see it, if I just adjust my lens a bit, I can see it, like Cami said, in full color. And that doesn't mean that I don't have my own grief about letting go of my own images and experiences, which for me is different than grieving my child. So I know there's a couple of really important questions happening. So let's keep going.
Thank you for that. We have a question about the sibling relationship and any particular navigation around that as an adult sibling. Maybe Jordan, do you want to tackle that one first? Did you have adult siblings when you were starting your journey?
Yes, I did have adult siblings. And I had everything from complete and total I love you no matter what, to a brother who said to me, I love you, but if a trans woman walks into the bathroom with my daughter, I'm going to kill him. Right. So I had both absolute love and absolute not understanding what a trans person is. And so for me, I was able to walk that journey and have a conversation with my brother and help. He was stuck on, I get to have my opinion. And what I said to him was, yes, you get to have your opinion, but when it's uneducated, it's a judgment. And so from there, we got to actually start with educating him and showing him that who he thinks a trans woman is, or who he thinks a trans man is not who we actually are. And so it took some educating with him. My other siblings were just, I love you no matter what.
Any other, or actually, I want to hear what other folks have to say, but I do want to point out to our audience that we don't have a hard stop at 6:30. If people want to linger and stay, we'll continue to chat. We do have this space until 7, maybe just before 7, like 6:50. So don't feel like we're gonna hustle you out of here. But if folks need to take off and head into their evening, that's fine. But just so you know, we don't have a hard stop. So. Thank you so much, Jordan, for sharing that about your siblings. Anyone else want to talk about sibling relationships?
Sure, I'll chat briefly. I have a brother who's about 4.5 years younger than me, and then I have another brother who's about 13 years younger than me. So the one who's closest in age to me, we were really oil and water growing up, to say the least, and we really struggled. And coming out or inviting in, as I did, actually brought us closer together than we ever were. And we are now, but he is now my best friend. Most of our family have moved out of the area. He doesn't live too far. I still do regular dinners with him and his fiance and whatnot. So it really was a positive experience. He is the only person out of everyone, even my mom, everybody, who has not misgendered me once, ever. And so I just, you know, that the support from him has been absolutely amazing. And you know, I think the secret to our success is that he doesn't really treat me any different than he did before. You know, he sees that I'm still me. I still like the same nerdy things I liked before, and we still geek out on our stuff and play online games together and whatnot. So I think that's part of the biggest trick, is that siblings, you know, feel pressure from different areas to, you know, treat somebody differently, to oh, okay, this person's now this person, that's a big thing. When, remember, youth tend to experience this on a different level than adults do, as far as acceptance and, oh, okay, let me process that. All right, that's good. Let's go get some food or whatever, right? Whereas adults we tend to think more about gender than our kids do. I'll just take that line from Jana. So yeah, just to know that my younger brother, we're not very close. We were never really that close. He just hasn't had enough time around me to really see a whole lot, but he doesn't have any issues with me or anything. You know, we're still siblings. So anyway, just to put that little bit out there, that for siblings, if you're struggling with it, just remember that they are who they've always been. They just might be kind of wrapped in a different package. I don't know if that quite makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah,
Any other thoughts on sibling?
it was actually Amaya who said to me, Mom, I would ask him questions and he would say, Mom, you think about gender way more than I do. And that's why I do the work, is so that he doesn't have to. And I hope one day our work will be unneeded, because there will be so much understanding, acceptance, and support out there.
Yeah, my sister is 2.5 years and 1 day older than me, so not an adult sibling type situation. But you know, I found that you know, me coming out has strengthened our relationship. Me being trans, she's gay. You know, we work on the same things together. We do panels and trainings together. And you know, when I started high school at Redwood, she was a senior when I was a freshman, and she helped me advocate for myself, and that was really special. And so, you know, it's different because I was young, and she was kind of at that age where she was able to kind of help me out with that. But you know, I think for siblings have a unique opportunity with this, but ultimately any family member, you know, when someone comes out as trans, I think that it's a really great opportunity to say, okay, great, how can I support you? And just kind of offering yourself in that position, and that can be really special. You know, not saying that, you know, all right, well, we're going to need to do this, this, and this, but just like offering yourself as a resource and saying, like, and just asking, you know, what can I do? Do you need anything? Can I help? Can be really great. But just being there and knowing that, you know, nothing really has to change about your relationship. Just to the pronouns that you use and the name that you use, that sort of thing. But yeah, they're the same person. It's just kind of a newer understanding of them.
We got another really well thought out question here from Rebecca in our chat. How do you respond to friends or family who say young people are non-binary? It's just a phase, or it's a fad. Lots of people are saying non-binary, so and so's saying it now.
Yeah.
How do you respond to someone in your close circle that's saying that?
Well, I would say that, first of all, gender is a social construct. There are pieces of our biology that tend to correspond along two different tracks of what we think of as male or female, but even the concept of biological sex is not so accurate. Many people are intersex, and many, you know, the idea that, you know, well, women have 2 X chromosomes and men have X and Y chromosomes, like it's just not accurate scientifically. But gender, specifically, the way that we think about it, is entirely social. It's entirely societal. indigenous cultures across the world have always known about trans people and non-binary people throughout the entirety of history. I mean, non-binary as a concept came before anything else, because the gender binary is what is the social construct. So, you know, trans people in indigenous cultures have often been held in positions of respect, positions of spiritual importance and honor. When colonization happened in North America, what I know more about is colonization in North America. Gender roles were enforced as a means of controlling indigenous cultures to have power over them. So ultimately, you know, being trans, being non-binary has existed forever. Non-binary is a newer word for it, that's all. And more people are learning about it through the internet, particularly. Because, you know, we can find each other and we can, like, I figured out what I knew that I was non-binary because I saw it on the internet and it immediately resonated with me. And that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that it's a fad, didn't mean that it was a phase. People's identities can shift over time, but identity shifting over time, that can be thought of more as a process of figuring out who you are and like trying on different things, seeing what suits you. But the idea of being non-binary has been around forever. And, you know, if you look at history, and as well, if you look at biology, if you look at science, the idea of sex isn't binary either. And the idea of gender hasn't been as well.
Anybody? Cami, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love to just tack onto this real quick. And a lot of the work that I've done with parents, and I do a lot of work with parents and with families, but about any issue, regardless of gender or sexuality, whenever we hear the term just a phase, it's usually used in a dismissive term, right? To just kind of dismiss, like, oh, no, that's not, trust me, don't worry about it. It's going to go back to the way it was or what have you, right? And so I find that when people come to terms with the or think about the term, you know, oh, it's just a phase. Is it really a phase, or is it that it's scary or something that that person is resisting because it's going to mean they're going to have to change, whether it's behavior, whether it's learn new knowledge, whether it's make adjustments that are inconvenient or uncomfortable for them. I find that often happens also too, you know, especially when we come to gender. So few people in America, it's like 20% at best in America know that they know somebody who's trans, who's within the trans umbrella. So whereas like 90% of individuals know somebody who identifies as lesbian, gay, or bisexual. So there's a little more normalized in that realm. But non-binary is kind of a newer term, and it is something that a lot of people just don't have a whole lot of experience with, or just don't understand. The binary, you know, oh, this person transitioned from male to female or female to male, that I can kind of grasp because I've lived in the binary, not me, I'm just saying this in general, have lived in the binary for so long that I can understand those concepts. But to exist outside of that binary, or even as both, that's I can't comprehend that. That's no, it's just a phase. Because it's just hard for me to understand. And it's not to judge, it's not to place any, you know, blame or dismissal or anything, but that's how it often comes off as. So just that when we go to that just a phase in our minds, it's important for us to all check ourselves. Okay, is it really just a phase, or is this something that's really kind of challenging for us to even understand? Or what kind of changes would this require me to make if I accepted it? Right, do some of our own work before we project that onto other people. I just think that's important.
Also, there are lots of non-binary elders in the community that we can look to as examples, and kind of showing that like it's not just like kids on Tumblr or whatever who are wanting to be special. That one bugs me more than anything. But you know, adults realize that they're non-binary too. Elders in the community, it's been, you know, there's been some struggle to get acceptance with non-binary identities, even within the LGBTQ community, as there has also been struggle to gain acceptance with the trans community within the broader like LGBTQ community. But there are many trans and non-binary elders, you know, who you can look to as examples, and who can tell their stories, like, and even examples of kind of what we think of as gender nonconformance, but people who may, if they had grown up kind of in, you know, closer to now, like maybe they would have identified differently. But thinking about like the butch community, you know, there's so much gender nonconformance, that even people who don't identify as non-binary, you know, it's kind of a similar idea, and people express themselves similarly. So, you know, there are lots of examples that you can look to. Leslie Feinberg comes to mind, and the book Stone Butch Blues, I would offer as a recommendation, but yeah, that's what I got to say.
I know Cammie mentioned that she did need to leave.
Yeah,
so that she could get.
I'm okay. My appointment
You're
moved back. I'm fine. Thanks.
okay. Well, I love that we started. I mean, as a librarian, I have to grasp onto when we start talking about books. So thank you, Alex, for bringing up Stone Butch Blues. I actually have it on my shelf. I'm at my house right now, and I have a copy of that on my shelf back there. I should have got my books ready to show off. I want to be respectful of everybody's evening and kind of sending us off into time with family. And Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg. Sonoma County Library and most public libraries, as far as I'm concerned in our profession, are very queer friendly spaces and institutions. And if you're somebody who lives in Marin County, certainly check your Marin County Public Library online catalog. There's tons and tons of wonderful books for all ages, tons of information. Alex shared a lot of great history with us. About kind of, there's so much to know and so many different perspectives. So there's a lot of great information in our public libraries that you can check out. Like I said, libraries are very queer friendly institutions. So if you're feeling a little bit nervous and, you know, you go in and there's a librarian there and you ask about, you kind of want a romance book, but you want a different kind of romance. I got that question a lot from young people. And I always felt very honored that they would choose me to ask that question. There's a lot of great information in our libraries about all these topics. I wish I could put a bunch of books in front of you and give you links and all of that, but please do connect with us. You have Megan, you emailed people. So if anyone has questions, you can always get in touch with your librarians and find out more and continue learning and with all of us as we evolve with these topics. Our panel has been so generous, both with their time and with their stories and being vulnerable with us, and super appreciate everything that you shared with us tonight. Thank you so much to all of our wonderful attendees who came. Just such a generous conversation, really wonderful questions, and we really appreciate that our community is taking this as an important topic that we all need to engage with, even if it's uncomfortable, even if we don't want to say the wrong thing, being vulnerable enough to make a mistake. I think that says a lot. So thank you so much for being here. We want to make sure that all of our neighbors and friends and family have resources and that they feel safe, that someone's there to listen and understand them. So thank you so much. There's a few great links in our chat here. Somebody, thank you so much, Alex, for putting that link about Leslie Feinberg's book, Stone Butch Blues, and the Spahr Center links there. Yeah, please do get in touch with your public library or any of these great organizations if you have any questions about this. We have lots of other great virtual events. You can always check our events calendar. Megan works very hard to put these on, and we love getting to connect with our community this way. Our libraries are slowly reopening to the public, so you can make appointments to come in and see us here in Sonoma County, and I know that's true for libraries around the Bay Area. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time tonight. Really, really appreciate that you were here and that we could maybe do this again sometime. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for hosting us. And I know that there's still a few questions, and Jordan did answer back in the chat. Cami, did you want to?
I would love to just throw 2 cents in on getting youth to go to the groups.
Yes, that I'd love to hear. And it's not just youth. I know one of the people asking has an adult,
Okay, it's
but an adult child.
some of the challenges around groups and going to groups is that it highlights this one aspect of ourselves. This is something that I do kind of get on my soapbox and preach about, in that we are more than trans. Okay, we are full functioning individuals in society. I mean, to whatever extent that is for each of us. But we all have interests. We all have other things that we like to do. We all like, most of us like to have social connections. We have our hobbies, etc. And so it's really important for us to honor and acknowledge that. So when I was running the youth group for a little over a decade, God, it's so long. When I had a youth that was struggling to kind of connect and to attend, I often pitched it in a way, and I don't mean to like pitch it as though I'm trying to like sell them something, but I framed it, I'll put it that way, much more as, hey, there are a lot of other kids here that probably have some similar interests to you. There's a video game you like? Well, I can almost guarantee you that there's 2 other kids that probably like that same video game. You want to come to group and talk about the video game? That's fine. You don't have to talk about anything else. Just come and see if there's other kids here that might have, or other youth or adults. I mean, it doesn't have to be kids, but that's my experience. That you might be able to find a connection with, that you might be able to get some of that, wow, this person's safe. Maybe if I don't talk to the whole group, maybe I can make friends with this person and I can have an ally here to connect with, right? And it starts that way. And then before you know it, they're regular attendees because they find that there's value in it. But it's a lot of it is helping them to see a reason why it might be useful, so that they're kind of making the decision to go to the group on their own, as opposed to doing it because you told them or asked them to. I saw the concept of, lead a horse, right? The whole concept of give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime, teach a man to fish and make him think that it was his idea. That person can change the world. So that's kind of my comment on that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Also just going to plug Fel right now, who is the current youth program coordinator, and runs our current support groups, as well as facilitates the Youth Advocacy Coalition. I mean, getting involved with YAC really helped me a lot kind of in those areas, because it kind of gave me a way to channel all of that, well, some of that energy into something that could be productive and helping people, and addressing some of the issues that have made me feel so bad, and trying to fix them. So, I would recommend YAC for what it's worth. And I would also say that, a lot of it for a lot of people just happens because the world that we live in is kind of shitty towards trans people. And some of it I feel like is kind of just a baseline state of being for anyone who's marginalized, really living in a world that's kind of out to get you in certain ways. And don't underestimate that. I would say the impact that can have on a person's mental health. And I think that the way, it's for that sort of thing, I think the question that can be asked is like, not necessarily how can I fix this, because mental health problems aren't always something that can just be fixed. There's no magic bullet for anything, but more like, how can I cope with this? And I think that solidarity and finding people who have had similar experiences is so valuable. And just finding your community wherever you can. And it takes some people longer than others. I've struggled with depression since 5th grade, and I still do. I've gone through so many different meds and all sorts of stuff. And that's part of the process, unfortunately. I think just like sometimes that's just life for a time period. And I think giving kids this space to kind of go through that and trying to help them in whatever way you can, but also understanding that sometimes life just sucks. Sometimes the world just sucks, and it's more about what can we do to make it gentler, what can we do to make it easier than how can we fix it. That's kind of a reframing that's helped me with some of my stuff personally, because I know I get really overwhelmed about like the state of the world. So but I think finding community is the thing that's helped me the most, and what I would recommend to anyone really.
And I'd just like to add just a little bit to that. Alex touched on mental health, and we are at a higher suicide rate than anyone, but anybody who has to split themselves half in two to exist in this world may have a little mental instability. Not just trans people, anyone who has to split themselves in half. And so it's that splitting that we really are trying to avoid by supporting our children as youth when they come out.
With that beautiful last statement, I think I'm going to say goodnight and see you next time to everyone. Thank you so much again for your wonderful questions and for being here tonight. And hope you learned something. And please encourage your friends and family to check out our virtual events and other things coming up, and our library collections. Lots of great queer content. So thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
coming.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you,
Night.
everyone.
We'll send out the recording to folks, and just so appreciative of everyone being here. Thank you all.